This is Carl Stafford, Extension Agent in Culpeper, Virginia, and livestock forages are my appreciation in agriculture and the soils. I'm for soil because what it does for that system that I'm so appreciative of, pastures, and you get on into no-till crops as well. That soil matters everything to the production of that system and soil life and what the benefits of storing carbon, organic matter, productivity, moisture, retention. So I am for soil because it does a lot for agriculture.
And we are off and running with another episode of For the Soil, a Conversation. I'm Jeff Ishee. We'll get to our special guest in just a few moments, but I wanted to remind you about a recent post that we have on our blog at forthesoil.org. Just go to the menu bar there at the top of the website on the right-hand side, and you'll see blog. And one of those blog entries is 5 priorities of soil health management. Priority number 1, eliminate erosion. Very interesting reading and some good resources there. Be sure to check it out at forthesoil.org, and there at the menu bar at the top, just click on blog and you'll see 5 priorities of soil health management. Priority number 1, eliminate erosion. Now to this week's podcast. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of For the Soil, a Conversation. I'm your host, Jeff Ishee, and joining me, my co-host, Dr. Eric Bendfeldt with Virginia Cooperative Extension Community Viability. Mary Sketch Bryant with the Virginia Soil Health Coalition is taking the week off this week, a very well-deserved rest. She'll be back with us very soon. Dr. Bendfeldt, would you introduce our guest today?
Yes, Jeff, we're very pleased to have Dale Strickler with us of Regenerative Wisdom. I have read a couple of his books and the Complete Guide for Restoring Your Soil, and he's also done additional work on drought resilience and managing pasture. So really look forward to the conversation, Dale, and welcome to the podcast. And if you could just share a little bit more about your background in farming and soil health.
Well, I grew up in southeast Kansas on a diversified farm, and I guess you would say I was a little bit isolated from the rest of the world. I didn't get out much, and I assumed that the entire world of farming was quite similar to what I grew up on, which in southeast Kansas, we have very shallow clay pan soils over limestone bedrock. And the saying is that we're a week away from a drought if we don't get a rain, and we're an hour away from a flood if we do get a rain, because our soil function was just so miserable. We had no infiltration of rainfall because of the heavy clay. And as it turns out, our management at the time, we didn't know that because we just managed soil like everybody else did, through tillage and so forth. And when I went to college, as I then started to travel around more, visit, my college friends, places where they farmed, I found out that they had something we didn't, and that was soil instead of clay. And I just struck me that, gosh, if I could turn this clay that we're farming into soil, actual functional soil, gosh, we'd be rich. So that started my fascination with soil improvement over the years, because it seemed like every year about last day of June, our corn crops would look great, and then by mid-July they'd be dead, and it was just so discouraging. And I just felt consumed with that mission. Then as I got older and into my professional career, I got a teaching job. I taught agronomy at a junior college for 15 years, Cloud County Community College in north central Kansas. And then I entered private industry after that, and worked various jobs with Land O'Lakes and seed companies, so forth. And then now I've progressed into essentially my own consulting company, taking what I have learned over the years and tried to use it as a platform to help other people improve their soil and their farming and ranching operations. I guess one thing that I kind of specialize in is in drought resilience. I wrote a book, the Drought-Resilient Farm, based on my experiences, observations in beginning in 2012. I guess beginning long before that, but what really triggered me to start writing that book was year 2012, which was the worst drought year in history up until that point. And I had neighbors who, separated by barbed wire fences, one would have a 0 yield on corn, and right across the fence someone would have 160 bushel yield. And that was actually rather common. The difference in farming practices just really.
Do you attribute that totally to management techniques? And if so, what techniques can we use to make our farms drought resistant?
Well, sometimes it's the absence of some management. Tillage makes people very, very susceptible to droughts. So it really, I was taught that you tilled soil, loosen it up so that rainfall would enter it. That is absolutely not what happens. Tillage drastically reduces the rate of infiltration of rainfall into the soil. That is a big misconception that a lot of people in agriculture have. But when you compare it side by side, it's very apparent how much water stands on top of tilled soil and readily enters long-term no-till soil. And the longer that soil is no-till, the more dramatic that becomes. Another big one is cover crops and crop rotation. And if I could kind of in that year of 2012, people who were growing corn in tilled soil were the 0 corn yields. People who were no-tilled corn into soybean stubble in a corn soybean rotation were making about 40. People who no-tilled into wheat stubble, which has more residue, more root channels, they were in about the 80 bushel range. And people who no-tilled who had a long-term history of cover crop use in a complex crop rotation, or who no-tilled into alfalfa that had been terminated, they were in the 120 to 160 bushel range.
Well, Dale, we've here in the Shenandoah Valley, both in where Jeff lives in Augusta County and where I live in Rockingham County, we've only just recently had some substantial rain. We could still use quite a bit more, but over the last 11 years, how have you seen farmers adapting to some of these fluctuations and variability in their, whether it's weather or climate?
Say that again. I'm sorry.
Oh, what changes have you seen in the last 11 years since 2012 with farmers adopting new practices or learning from their neighbors?
Yeah, one of the biggest changes I've seen, honestly, is social media. People are essentially communicating more about what they're doing, and I can see what someone's doing in Missouri at 8:30 in the morning, and then by 8:45 I can see what someone's doing on their farm in eastern Colorado, in just a few minutes apart. And people are sharing their successes, they're sharing their techniques, and they're discussing. It's every single day. You have the ability to come together and communicate with people. And the other one is the explosion of conferences like the one you have there in Virginia, where people can get together and discuss and learn from each other.
We're talking today with Dale Strickler, author and consultant. He has more than 30 years of experience in agronomy, and you have an organization, Dale, I believe it's called Regenerative Wisdom. Is there a website for that?
Yes, there is. Regenerativewisdom.com.
Well, that was easy. Regenerativewisdom.com. And I wanted to ask you, and I don't necessarily want to take a deep dive on this, but I would like to get your opinion on the topic of deep tillage, subsoiling. I recall 25 years as a farm broadcaster now, one of my very first field visits, we went out to a place for an equipment demonstration, and they had a subsoiler. And I can vividly remember the salesperson saying, "This subsoiler has 30-inch shanks. It will break up any compaction that you have." And he went on and on about the benefits of subsoiling with this deep shank subsoiler. And I'm curious about that. We talk about disturbing the top of the soil, but does subsoiling and deep tillage have a role to play in what we call no-till agriculture?
Yes, but not necessarily in the way it's promoted. And I'll give you my personal feelings on subsoiling. First of all, in a drought, especially in a clay soil, what happens to a clay soil in a drought? Cracks open, right?
Yeah.
So if there's inch-wide cracks that you can lose tools in, what is that subsoiler going to do that the drought itself did not do?
I don't know what happens 30 inches underneath the surface of the soil, but the way it was explained to me is that it opens up channels for that moisture to move around and provide moisture for the deep roots.
Is the common reasoning behind subsoiling, but and that works. You open channels that remain open until you get a rainfall or you get another tillage event. Let me just give you the results of a study I saw from Washington State on the effect of subsoiling on water infiltration. And they measured water infiltration, control, no subsoiling at all. They subsoiled, and where it was subsoiled, the plots that were subsoiled only had about 50 to 100% increase in water infiltration rates, which is very impressive. However, that's not what people do on cropland. When they subsoil, in order to get that field ready to plant, they have a subsequent tillage trip to level the field out, smooth it up. Where they did that, the water infiltration rate was half of what the control was. They not only eliminated the value of that trip, they went backwards by a substantial margin. They cut their water infiltration rate in half of what it was with no treatment at all. And so it depends a little bit on your context. Those channels need to remain open. If they're sealed over on the top, you lose all the benefit of that subsoiling trip. So in a pasture situation, oftentimes you can leave that channel open. And then it can be a real benefit. And I know people that do that, and it is quite beneficial, particularly if it's done on the contour rather than up and down the slope. So you can capture runoff in those channels. But how it's usually practiced in cropland, it can be very counterproductive.
And Dale, one of the principles, along with minimizing soil disturbance that we're promoting here in Virginia, is the idea of maximizing living roots. And yes. I know a previous speaker has talked, Steve Groff has talked about bio-drilling and the role of cover crops and deep tillage radishes. What's your experience with?
It's very, very beneficial. Essentially, the lifeblood of soil is root exudates. Root exudates feed the microbes that create aggregation. And once you get aggregation, you get oxygen penetration into the soil through that pore space in between those soil aggregates. People subsoil because they think that there's a mechanical barrier to roots, to root growth. And the soil's just too hard. That's really seldom the case. I mean, if you've ever walked down an old city sidewalk, you've seen where that concrete has been broken by roots. It's lack of oxygen that limits root growth, not mechanical hardness. And so creating pore space and vertical channels within the soil is far more important than alleviating mechanical hardness in the soil. And that's accomplished by root exudates feeding microbes. That's the real key to increasing your root depth.
Just about a minute or so remaining in this episode of For the Soil, a Conversation. And we're talking today with Dale Strickler. He is an author and consultant. And Dale, I was just, while we were speaking here, I went to your website at regenerativewisdom.com. And for our listeners who visit that website, what can they expect to find?
Well, you can schedule consultations, which is the primary business. You can also order books off the website, find out when speaking events are occurring. So you can visit us in person or have us come and visit you. And so those are the primary resources on the website.
Yeah, very good. I'm trying to still take it all in. Once again, that web address is regenerativewisdom.com. Dale Strickler, I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us here at For the Soil, a Conversation. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for the opportunity.
And Dr. Bendfeldt, we'll catch you in the next one.
Yes, thank you, Dale, and thank you, Jeff.
For the Soil, a Conversation is made possible with funding support from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation and the Agua Fund. Other partners include the USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service, Virginia Cooperative Extension, Virginia State University, Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation, and partners of the Virginia Soil Health Coalition. Views expressed on this podcast are those of each individual guest. To download a copy of this or any other episode, visit the website forthesoil.org. And if you should have a specific question about soil health, just call your local extension office, your local USDA service center, or a Soil and Water Conservation District office. Music used during today's program was provided courtesy of the Flip Charts, all rights reserved. For the Soil, a Conversation is produced by On the Farm Radio in collaboration with Virginia Tech. I'm your host, Jeff Ishee.